Under Committee Report number 319, this is the bill strengthening the National Housing Authority. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the aforementioned bill is now in order.
Mr. President, I move to resume the period of individual amendments using the clean copy of the bill as of January 22, 2025 as our working draft and recognize as sponsors Senator Amy R. Marcos and Senator Aquilino Coco.
Hear of it. The distinguished sponsor, Senator Amy Marcos, is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Be eternally grateful. On Senate Bill number 2818 under Committee Report 319 or the National Housing Authority Act as follows. On page 3, delete the entire section 5 on capitalization, specifically from line 22 until page 4, line 2, replace with new text which shall read as follows. Section 5, capitalization. The authorized capitalization of the authority shall be increased from 5 billion pesos to 10 billion pesos, which shall be fully subscribed and paid by the Republic of the Philippines as follows. Act for fiscal year 2026. B, the remaining balance of 5 billion pesos shall be fully paid within a period of 10 years and included in the Annual General Appropriations Act. I so move, Mr. President. These are all the individual amendments on Senate Bill 2818 under Committee Report number 319.
Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none.
With no other amendments, Mr. President, I move to close the period. I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2818. I so
Any
move, Mr. President.
objection? Hearing none. Aforementioned measure is approved in second reading. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2818.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
President, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Committee Report number 488 on Senate Bill number 29. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, consideration of Senate Bill number 2965 is now in order. Senate Secretary is directed to read the title only of the bill without prejudice.
Appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Majority Floor Leader.
To sponsor the measure, Mr. President, I move to recognize Senator Amy Marcos, Chairperson of the Committee on Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Any objection? Hearing none, the sponsor of the measure, Senator Amy Marcos, is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Senate President and Majority Leader, my distinguished colleagues in the Senate. It is with compassion and our shared and unwavering commitment to the welfare of our people that I stand before you to submit and seek the approval of Committee Report 488, sponsoring herewith Senate Bill 2965, an act granting free funeral services to poor families, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. This legislation seeks to address the added and profound burden imposed on too many Filipino families during what is already a most difficult moment in their lives, the loss of a loved one. Masaklap na kapalaran ng mamatayan ng mahal sa buhay at lalong masaklap kung sa gitna ng ating dalamhati daragdag pa ang bigat ng mga pinansyal na pasanin na kaakibat ng kamatayan. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, the PSA, in 2022, there was an average of 1,862 deaths per day in the Philippines, translating into 78 registered deaths per hour. For us Filipinos, honoring our dearly departed is a sacred tradition deeply rooted in our values of love, respect, and family. However, the reality for many Filipinos is that the high cost of funerals, burial services, and other related expenses has made it nearly impossible to provide even the simplest of dignified farewells to their loved ones. Indeed, if living today is costly, these days dying is utterly unaffordable. According to recent data, a modest funeral in rural Philippines will cost a bare minimum of 10,000 to 20,000 30,000 in Metro Manila. For families living below the poverty line, this expense is not just a part of their daily struggle, it is an impossible reach. Many grappling with inconsolable grief. Kung wala kang pera, huwag kang maluho, huwag kang mamatay. Hindi ako nagbibiro, totoo yan. Sa oras na mamatay ang isang karaniwang Pilipino, may saya ng namatay. Magpapakain ka sa burol, kape, biskwit, sabaw. May gastos sa paglilibing. Uupa ka ng sasakyan, magbabayad para sa puntod. Pagkagaling sa libing, magpapakain ka muli. Pero hindi pa natatapos dyan. Magpapadasal pa sa sa 40 nga araw. At magpapakain ulit. Magpapadasal ulit sa babang luksa at magpapakain ulit. O di ba? Maluho nga talaga ang mamatay. Our proposed legislation aims to bridge this, defined by the NEDA, the National Economic Development Authority, and those who cannot afford in a sustained manner to provide their minimum basic needs of food, health, education, housing, or other essential amenities of life. With this new program, burial services, transport, cremation, and interment services, including the provision of a casket or urn and venue, as the case may be, offered by mortuaries. Marahil ang tanong ng marami, saan naman manggagaling ang pondo para sa panukalang ito? The program should be financed through a dedicated budget allocation in the General Appropriations Act, specifically under the Department of Social Welfare, its sustainability. The proposed measure also encourages partnerships with private funeral service provider to expand the provision wherein the violation of the measure will be penalized with a fine not exceeding 200,000 pesos and the suspension of it. It's a manifestation of our collective empathy as public servants, the concrete proof of our compassion as a people. It ensures that no Filipino, regardless of social standing, ang dasal ng nanay ko sa lamay ay isang taong makadiyos, makatao at tunay. Sapagkat ang burol para sa ating mga Pilipino ay hindi lamang patungkol sa pagdadalamhati ng mga naulilang pamilya, kundi para rin sa pagdiriwan ng buhay, kung saan pinagsasama-sama ang mga legislation goes beyond addressing a financial need. It is about restoring dignity to our marginalized kaluluksa. Kasama ninyo sa pagdadalamhati ang inyong pamahalaan. Ang panukalang ito ay ang konkretong paraan upang ipamalas natin ang pakikiramay sa ating mga kababayang nagluluksa. Higit siya. Maraming salamat po. Senate Bill number 2965 sa lalong madaling panahon. Maraming salamat po.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I associate myself with the sponsorship speech of Sen. At ito rin po ngayon ay pinatutupad namin sa buong ikawalong distrito ng lalawigan ng Cavite. Mr. President, Senator Ronald De La Rosa would like to insert his co-sponsorship speech into the records as well. Senator Rafi Tulfo would like to deliver a co-sponsorship speech, and I move that he be recognized.
Senator Tulfo is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
A measure that seeks to grant free funeral services to poor families. Bilang ko-author nitong panukala na ito, naniniwala ako na ang bawat Pilipino ay may karapatang may hatid sa kanyang huling hantungan ng may dignidad kahit ano pa mang estado mo sa buhay. I would like to thank our dear Senator Amy Marcos for sponsoring this bill. In moments of grief, no family should have to bear the added burden of financial distress simply to lay their loved ones to rest. Para sa marami nating kababayan na tinatawid lang araw-araw ang kanilang pangkain at mga simple pangangailangan, ang gasto sa paglibing ay mabigat na problema. Sa kasalukuyan, ang gastos para sa lamay at libing ay di bababa sa 50,000 piso. Pero ang mismong libingan ay ibang gastos pa yan. Napipilitan tuloy ang mga pamilya na nagdadalamhati na humagilap ng pera o dili kaya umutang. Mr. President, this bill recognizes their plight and seeks to institutionalize a system where accredited funeral establishments, in coordination with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, will provide poor families with essential funeral services free of charge. Moreover, this bill establishes safeguards against abuse and provisions for fair reimbursement of funeral service providers. It is a balanced approach to colleagues to this measure. We have expenses for those most in need we alleviate financial hardships and allow the families to focus on what truly matters, honoring the lives of their departed loved ones. With this, I respectfully urge my colleagues to support this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Jinggoy Estrada would likewise have his co-sponsorship speech be inserted to the records.
Noted and entered into the records.
President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2965. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2920.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
President, the parliamentary status is that having to Senator Aquilino Pimentel III to propose individual amendments. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Pimentel, is recognized to propound individual amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. 12 sections and the bill, committee report bill is only 2 pages long, but do not be alarmed if the amendments seem to be long because I just need to read into the records the new wording of more just in our treatment of persons. Insert a new section 1 known as an act creating crimes and for other purposes is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 3. Who may file claims? The board may file claims for the following may file claims for compensation before the board, colon. A. Any person who was unjustly detained and released without being charged, semicolon. B. Accused could not have committed or did not commit the imputed crime, semicolon. C. Any person who was unknowing that no crime was in fact committed or that the accused could not have committed or did not commit the imputed crime, semicolon. D. Any victim of arbitrary or illegal detention by the authorities as defined in the revised penal code under a final judgment of the court, semicolon. And E. Any person who is a victim of violent crimes, period. For purposes of this act, violent crime shall include rape and shall likewise refer to offenses committed with malice, which resulted in death or serious physical and/or psychological injuries, permanent incapacity or disability, insanity, abortion, serious trauma, or committed with torture, cruelty, or barbarity. I so move, Mr. President.
Objection? Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, amendment is approved. Amendment, there being none, amendment is approved.
So on page 1 of the committee report, lines 1 to 3, delete the phrase enclosed within the commas, beginning with the phrase otherwise known up to the words for other purposes. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
That is just a styling amendment because that phrase was mentioned now in the section that we inserted, Mr. President. On page 2, line 2, delete the word higher and let us reinstate the original word in the law, lower.
Lower.
Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
On page 2, line 10. Tama ba? After the word he, let's insert, I move to insert a forward slash or a slash. And then the she, Mr. President. I so move, Mr. From Senator Lauren Legarda, which we are accepting. Not only because it is her birthday today, Mr. President, but it really makes a lot of sense and it improves our bill, Mr. President. So page 2, line 18, after the word board or the phrase which shall be promulgated by the board, insert the phrase with the goal of streamlining.
Hearing none, amendment is approved.
On page 2, line 19, insert a new section which states as follows. Anong section to?
It will now be the new
Section
section
five.
6.
Section
Section 6.
3. Section 5, Mr. President. On page 2, line 19. So, to
Yes, section 5.
of claims by heirs. In case of death or incapacity of any person entitled to any award under this act, comma, the claiming spouse, comma, children, comma.
Amendment. Hearing none, amendment is approved.
It was only a styling amendment, Mr. President, bringing the old provision up to date with the ones affected by the insertion of this last amendment be renumbered accordingly. That's
Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
that would be all, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, with no other amendment, I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of individual amendments now closed.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading, Senate Bill number 2920. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the bill is approved on second reading. Session is suspended.
Move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2920.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr.
Majority
President,
Floor Leader.
I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 11072 under Committee Report number 449 is the bill on the franchise area expansion of the Davao Light and Power Company Incorporated. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to resume the period of individual amendment using the clean copy of the bill as of 27 January 2025 as our working draft and recognize as sponsor Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Franchise Area Expansion of Davao Light and Power Company, Inc., with Senator Risa Ontiveros to interpolate. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senator Zubiri, the sponsor of the measure, and Senator Ontiveros is recognized. Are we going to go page by page, or is this interpolation with amendment?
I agreed yesterday, Mr. President, to allow interpretation with amendment. Okay.
Senator Ontiveros may proceed with her interjections. You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you
Salamat
very
Abi, Mr. President. And once again, salamat kaayo to the good sponsor. Just to make it of record again, for the information of the good presiding officer, I was listed to interpolate yesterday in the period of interpellation, but apparently the good deputy majority leader yesterday was not informed that I was listed to interpellate. So the deputy majority leader and the good sponsor agreed that there would be no prejudice to my
Yes.
Of course.
interpolating, posing questions
Of
during
course.
this period of
The
amendment.
lady may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, good sponsor, would you agree with me that aside from liberalizing, privatizing, and making electricity service more affordable, secured, and reliable, binanggit din ng EPIRA yung democratization of ownership ng power industry, good sponsor?
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Mr. President.
Salamat, thank you, good sponsor. So, kung ganon, at dahil ganon, maganda sigurong balikan natin ang tila nakalimutan na bahagi ng EPIRA kung saan kabilang sa mandatong ibinigay sa Department of Energy na siyang tagapangasiwa ng restructuring ng power industry ay isinasaad sa Section 37, letter O ng RA 9136. So to read, good sponsor, letter O, encourage private enterprises engaged in energy projects, including corporations, cooperatives, and similar collective organizations, to broaden the base of their ownership and thereby encourage the widest public ownership of energy-oriented corporations, close quote. So broadened ownership base.
Na committee in cooperatives for almost 10 years. Totoo po yung sinasabi niyo po, a ideal and true cooperative would be one
That I was already sure that the good sponsor is very familiar with this tenet. For aside from being a long time chair of the Senate Committee on Cooperatives, the good
By the way,
sponsor
Mr.
is
President,
considered. Yes,
the
good
gentle
sponsor.
lady is also my
I was
senior
his
vice chair.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. President. And the good sponsor is considered the father of the new Philippine Cooperative Code.
Yes.
Pero sa mga investor-owned private power companies katulad ng DLPC, ay posible ba ang sinasabi ng EPIRA na broadening of the ownership base, good sponsor?
We, under the EPIRA scenario, naging issue talaga yan na, and alam po ng ating butihing senadora, na when I was chairman of the Committee on Corporate, I put a provision on the that sparked a big debate, no, including the no tax exemption clause if you're not registered with the CDA. Sila daw ay mga totoong kooperatiba din po. But the debate also cost me a lot of political capital because in 2013 when I ran, the electric cooperatives were angry at me because now of my position that they do not share the same a member, not just dividends, member shares. As a matter of fact, the electric cooperatives, with due respect, I don't want to pick a fight with anybody. I'm done with that agency. In the true sense of electric cooperatives. Kaya, in a way, and management as well, Your Honor. So, and you know, I don't want to go back into that very heavy debate kasi alam mo naman, gusto ko pansinin ang nangyayari sa mga consumer na sila din dapat ang may-ari kasi sila din mismo ang umiiyak yung mga consumer. Maraming brownout na nangyayari sa kanilang lugar. So at the end of the day, let's go back to the consumer because the consumer is the one that's being affected by all this, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. Na-appreciate ko naman po, Mr. President, yung overview ng good sponsor in broad strokes sa ilan sa mga importanteng pinagdaanan up to this point in time ng iba't ibang klaseng kooperatiba. And the good sponsor has a good vantage point on that dahil bilang chair nga ng isang dekada sa Senate Committee on Cooperatives, hindi lang nila nakita yon but he was able in fact to assist in the clarification and kung hindi complete partial ng discussion kanina dun sa na mas ma-resolve pa ang iba't ibang mga issue nito ay actually dun sa review at saka possible amendment ng EPIRA. But having said that, I think having served as the good sponsors vice chair, yung isang very interesting and I think positive sign na nakikita ko sa hanay ng iba't ibang klaseng cooperatives and particularly dito sa bill natin, franchise ng DLPC, there's, I sense a broad support of various kinds of cooperatives, even for electric co-ops, kahit na may mga debate din sila at may ilang mga administrative problems na winurk out nila in the past few years or work out pa rin in terms of, yun na nga, kanina down Memory Lane, it's an important
Yes.
partial summary ng history of co-ops so far, including electric co-ops. But back particularly to DLPC, how public is DLPC today? O ganong karami sa shares niya ay publicly held, good sponsor?
DLPC siya public units. Pero yung mother company, which is allowed
Yeah.
under
The DLPC, Your Honor, Mr. President, Madam Senator, it's not a publicly listed company, but the mother company that owns DLPC is Aboitiz Power, which is publicly listed. And it's allowed under EPIRA. I think that's already challenged and answered in legal issues, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. And
Yeah, I
that,
may find out if you want how many percent is owned
please,
for
opo,
Aboitiz Power.
opo, yung mother company,
EPIRA Section 28 presentation sila.
Yes, I believe the Aboitiz Power has 7.5 billion shares public that are publicly
so,
owned.
opo,
Yes.
so mga 1/6 of the
One-
mother
one-
company, mga 1/6 is publicly held.
Yes.
Opo. All right, salamat po. So, Mr. President, i-encourage nyo pa rin po ba at ipopromote pa rin in line with declared state policy under the Philippine Cooperative Code, yung cooperative model sa distribution sector ng power industry, Mr. President?
Yes, absolutely, Your Honor. Actually, hindi naman natin ini-encourage na ma-privatize po lahat ito. As a matter of fact, and Buseco is the Bukidnon Second Electric Cooperative. So we work very well with the two of them. Sa mga public servants na I guess nagre-represent dito sa lugar na ito, inudyok namin sila na pababain pa ang kanilang presyo ng kuryente at serbisyo at pagandahin pa ang serbisyo sa taong bayan. As a matter of fact, in Fibeco, in my hometown, in my home district where Fibeco operates, there was a change of leadership by NEA. NEA kicked out all the board members of the board, and kicked out also the GM and replaced it with a new GM and new appointed members of the board. Because of the problems nga of stranded cost, poor payment to creditors, mahal ng presyo ng kuryente. So in that way, I'm just giving you a glimpse of the broad strokes of what NEA does. No? That's why electricity was going up too high. Nagmamahala dito sa mga lugar na ito, hindi po sila papayag na tumaas na ganun kalaki ang presyo ng kuryente dahil sila to be. And I'm not just pointing out to Nordeco, but this is happening all over the country. Kaya yan ang challenge namin ni Senator. On the light of the fact to be running out of their term by 2029. Yan talagang 2029, talagang din po ang mga bosses nila, no, or representante nila sa Kongreso, kung maganda ba ang performance nila sa lugar na yan. Kasi kung hindi po magandang performance nila sa franchise, then somebody has to fill that void. May talagang papasok to fill that void. Whether it is another setup cooperative or whether it is a private corporation, of course, that is a decision of Congress. Kasi we all know under the Constitution, franchises are like local bills. It emanates from Congress. So, yan po nangyari po na yun. In this case, no, hindi ko minamalit yung Nordeco. Hindi maganda ang ginawa niya. I'm not casting any aspersion to cooperatives because I love cooperatives. As a matter of fact, I just questioned Senator Amy Marcos earlier about there was a rally. Di ba may rally sa labas? Mga cooperatives ang nag-rally sa labas dahil natatakot sila mawala po yung pinaghirapan po natin na tax exemption nila. Na ilang beses po tayo nakipagtalo sa Department of Finance and the BIR. You were my vice chair at the time. We had several meetings on that. And just to make sure that we are still protective of them up to this day. So I truly love our cooperative sector. I truly love the cooperative movement. But just in this case po, it's a matter already of the cooperative being able to deliver effectively, efficiently, cheaply, the rate. Distinguished Senator.
Sequence of events na kung ang isang electric co-op mag-a-apply para sa renewal ng franchise nila, pero kung hindi yun, siguro mas understandable. Kaya lang iba yung naging sequence of events dito na tawag nito, current pa rin yung franchise ng Nordeco, pero may ibang. The same question that will touches upon the areas under an existing franchise of an electric cooperative. At dahil baliktad nga sa sequence of events na pinag-usapan natin, good sponsor na which is the usual sequence of events, ay kaya sa totoo lang ang tawag ng power unions at ilang advocacy groups sa nangyayaring ito ngayon ay franchise grab. But our good sponsor, the father of the Philippine Cooperative Code, would be the best person to answer this lingering policy question, Mr.
Actually,
President.
hindi naman sila nag-franchise grab because our dear Senate President is a learned and a wise lawyer. The franchise will end within 5 years prior approved. Ang gusto po ng mga representante po ay the first bill. But 3 years after that, where they're already within the 5-year prescription period or the 5-year period of application to Congress, they refiled again and I believe they were not allowed. I guess they were denied by their representatives. No one wanted to file on their behalf because of the request of the representatives in Congress that this is the better option for their franchise area.
Pwedeng umaksyon sa Senado. At
Opo.
kung
Opo.
hindi umaksyon ng House, then we have nothing to act on. So I suppose the implicit appeal dito sa line of questioning ko within this period of amendments, and I appreciate being able to still pose my questions na nalaktawan lang in this line of questioning yung ganito or
Mr. President, we have, I believe there are pending cooperatives that were approved already in the House for approval na here in the Senate. These are franchise given to cooperatives. So hindi lahat po. Hindi naman po zero. I think in the next Congress, in the 20th Congress, you and I and the Senate President will still be around. We will be getting, I believe we will be receiving a number of electric cooperatives for renewal.
The lady may proceed.
Yes, Mr.
Salamat,
President,
yes.
Leyeco
Good sponsor.
and Romelco has just been given in the 19th Congress their approval of new franchises. So hindi po lahat, Madam Sponsor. So there are, as we can see, we have also a few cooperatives that have passed congressional scrutiny and they're given a renewal of their franchise.
Salamat, good sponsor. Actually, in a way, tamang pasegue na dun sa susunod na tanong ko to look at the whole universe of electric cooperatives. And bago in-identify ng good sponsor at ng Senate President yung mga ibang electric co-ops na either naaprubahan na or pa-filean, we are discussing today from the private sector point of view, or baka yung ibang electric co-ops or baka this particular co-op is less favored or less on good terms with other stakeholders. But in any case, pasegue nga po sa susunod kong tanong, good sponsor. Most of the 121 electric cooperatives have been criticized, or worse, some of them ang sentimiento ng good sponsor, Mr. President.
Hindi naman lahat po, Madam colleague. Pero meron talaga. For example, yung sa BARM, yung sa BARM po has a lot to be desired. I know that we have several BARM ministers here. I don't know about Lanao Norte, if the Lanao Norte cooperative is doing better, but I know for a while they were not doing very well. I know they had a 12-day brownout po. And there was a series of cancellations. The whole Siargao was like in a state of emergency because for 12 days, this is not 12 hours, 12 days, they had no electricity in the most favored tourist spot now by foreigners. And there was a recent survey and they said that Siargao is their most favored spot for the Philippines now. No longer El Nido, no longer Boracay. They like the vibe in Siargao. So it's unforgivable that we want more investments to come in. We want more tourists to come in. We want more, I'd say, commerce to come in. We need electricity and we need affordable electricity. Gone are the days during the time of FVR. I remember former President Fidel V. So gone are the days. Right now, there are options. You have renewable energy, cheap energy from solar, 4 pesos, 50 centavos. You have all sorts of power sources that you can tap that will be much more affordable. So it's a matter now of the cheapest rates for the consumer.
Kasama dun sa appeal sa Senate at sa House ng ganitong line of questioning ay yun na nga kung sinabihan ng NEA ang electric co-ops that they should apply 5 years before, and in the case of this one, yung existing franchise ng Nordeco is still good for another 3 years na couldn't they. But then segue din na rin ako, Mr. President, good sponsor dito sa punto na yung issue maayos. I also share the sentiment. At the same time, I fully understand the challenges that electric report cited several reasons why the total electrification mission is not a walk in the park. I'm probably not for corporations and mas lalo pa siguro not for electric cooperatives. And the primary based on political targets imposed upon by powers that be, such as the barangay or sitio electrification, without considering pagiging yung non-profit character nila, kaya reliant sila sa subsidy. And under EPIRA, however, NEA's budget and its capacities to fund electric co-ops' financial requests were greatly kaparehong animal. But sa mundo natin, mahirap talagang pagkumparahin ang expectations natin mula sa electric co-ops at private corporations na may pribilehiyo para sa malaking tubo at capital. It mean that ng corporate takeovers, lalo na karamihan sa mga franchises nila ay lumalapit na sa expiration, kukuha na ng DLPC, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, what was the beginning of
Sorry, good
Sorry.
sponsor. The beginning was, in theory, humaharap ba yung 100
electric cooperatives into law? We granted them another 25 years to run their prospective franchise area. So it's not true, Your Honor. It's not true. So marami, and I already, pati ako ma'am, I committed also to help my local cooperatives. So it's not true po. Kasi for example, sa amin sa Bukidnon, sino papasok dun? Wala naman po kaming Davao Power and Light dun. So obviously, we'll have to support our electric cooperative to be able to continue. In this case kasi kapitbahay, ang pagitan lang po isang kalsada nandun na po sila. So that's why
Sana all dun sa iba pang 121 electric co-ops na may katulad ng good sponsor at iba pang stakeholders sa inyong lalawigan na susuporta dun sa dalawang electric co-ops. So, if this is the prevailing environment now, Mr. Good Sponsor, Mr. President, alam din sa mga recent takeover at talagang nagsubok silang magpumilit na ipagpatuloy at makapag-apply sa renewal ng prangkisa nila. Are we not in effect, would we not in effect be kahit cumulatively, no, declaring an end to that era of cooperativism in the power industry in favor, in principle, and with the gates open, in favor of full privatization, good sponsor?
Well, Your Honor, I think many laws that we passed previous, including EPIRA, had even NGCP once upon a time was government owned. They privatized it now, and you and I, who are both patriots, are also worried about the infusion of for vision that hopefully it will be back to 100% Filipino owned. But yes, that has been the trend all over the world when it comes to power generation. But we respect cooperativism. We respect electric cooperatives. So much so that we approved already 2 electric cooperatives and many more. We will be seeing many more electric cooperatives being approved here. I think the idea of the long time it takes to actually pass a law. As po ako sa kanila dahil yung kanilang franchise ay na-expire na po. And so it takes a long time, and I think in this case, that's why it has to be applied right away. So I don't want to put it as a general statement that it's going to be now private corporations. No. As a precedence, we passed a few electric cooperatives. I personally have committed to my electric cooperatives that I will support them in the Senate. So hindi po, I think it's on a case-to-case basis, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. Indeed, gaya ng sinabi ng good sponsor, EPIRA encouraged privatization, but as the good sponsor and I discussed at the start, EPIRA also encouraged the democratization of ownership of the power industry. So ang nakikita ko po dito, good sponsor, Mr. President, ay kahit marami po tayong gustong i-evaluate sa implementation ng EPIRA, kahit malamang meron tayong gustong i-propose na amendments o updating sa EPIRA, kahit sa simula ng EPIRA, parang na-envision niya ang isang, tatawagin kong parang mixed economy sa power sector, na may iba't ibang klase at iba't ibang sizes ng stakeholders. The large, including these corporations, medium-sized, and maliliit o medium-sized in the form of the electric cooperatives. Para din mas maintindihan po natin kung ganong ka seloso yung mga electric co-ops na bantayan, na nananatili silang stakeholders, even when we envision po, good sponsor, that post-EPIRA amendment scenario na dapat sana lahat, or dahil hindi na lahat, most of the 121 electric co-ops are still standing at stakeholder pa rin dun sa... So, just to make that of record, good sponsor, dahil it's
And we agree
inevitable,
with you, Mr.
pinabalikan
President.
natin
We
lahat
agree with
yung
the
EPIRA.
distinguished lady.
Salamat, good sponsor. Kaya each of them, of course, in this bill, Nordeco, and then yung ibang mga electric co-ops na nag-o-observe, they feel so strongly about each and every one that kumbaga comes up to bat dito sa floor natin. Dahil kakaunti na lang nga sila, and cumulatively, hindi naman makakatapat o makakakompete yung mga assets nila dun sa mga malalaking korporasyon. And yun, siguro they're also thinking, andito pa ba tayo post-EPIRA? Because they would really want to be part of that horizon.
Pero Madam Sponsor,
Sponsor.
Madam
Yes, Mr.
colleague,
President.
and Mr. President, I just want to put on record, but we approved already. This Congress, our Congress, this 19th Congress will still be. I think what they should fear is their member consumers, kung pangit yung trabaho nila, kung pangit yung servisyo nila. I think they just have to improve their services, Your Honor, Madam Mr. President. And
I hear you, good sponsor, and I'm sure the electric co-ops, Nordeco and other electric co-ops monitoring this, hear you, and they are just fighting for the time and the circumstances to prove. Well, as the good sponsor mentioned in earlier interpellations, or in the period of interpellation, Nordeco is actually AA right now, and actually pulled themselves up by their bootstraps from the earlier lower rating. Opo. So, and naiintindihan ko po yung sinasabi ng good sponsor, pero syempre, hindi naman natin ma-legislate yung damdamin at karanasan nila na they have seen a few other electric co-ops, including well-performing ones at that time, na na-take over ng corporate. So, nakainan sila ng share nila sa kabuuang power distribution sector natin, and not just numerically, but in terms of, so less of a balance then. Distinguished sponsor, we are lawmakers, and with the imminent approval of this franchise bill, are we not in fact abandoning or violating provisions of EPIRA, which we've been discussing, and even Presidential Decree 269, the same concern contained in the veto message of the President in July 2022? To quote, North Davao Electric Cooperative, Inc. has existing franchises in the expanded franchise area, which will subsist until 2028 and until 2033. The bill runs counter to the provisions of Section 27 of Republic Act Number 9136. Ang mangyayari dito, Mr. President, did we repeal that provision here in the bill? And also for PD 29 and RA 10531, Mr. President.
Well, nabago po yung Supreme Court decision on Ileco versus Executive Secretary na inilabas ng Supreme Court kamakailan. At matapos ang veto message ni Pangulong Marcos, sinabi ng Korte Suprema na hindi right ang franchise ownership kundi isang privilege na binigay po ng Kongreso. Kaya't may power at authority po ang Kongreso na baguhin at pawalang bisa ang isang franchise, lalo na't i-exercise ng Kongreso ang police power of the state para sa common good. That was a decision of the Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, as we speak, Your Honor, there are hearings now in the Committee on Franchise to revoke the NGCP franchise. Di ba? Grabe yung nakikita natin sa lounge, yung mga video clips of what's going on in that security and national security. I'd rather that we pass another piece of legislation that will state that strategic industries such as power generation and all should be made Filipino-owned, 100% Filipino-owned and managed. So that way, we don't go against the strength of the contracts and the franchises that we've given them. But the Supreme Court is very clear, and the Constitution is very clear that franchises is a privilege and not a right. So it has to do with the common good of the people. So yan ang pinaka-importante dyan, the common good of the community. Kung maganda naman yung trabaho po nila at wala naman ng umaalma, walang nagko-complain, walang umiiyak dahil sa mahal ng kuryente, hindi naman siguro sila magkakaproblema dito sa privatization. And in the presidential decree that created cooperatives, electric cooperatives in particular, Your Honor, Mr. President, no private sector participation in the countryside. This was in the 70s. So you're looking at areas of Mindanao, where I was from. So if you notice, most of the electric cooperatives are in the rural areas. Yung Meralco nga po na franchise na in-approve natin kanina, sinaka even to below area private enterprise na gustong pumasok doon at magsilbi dito sa mga lugar na ito. So, that was the creation of those electric cooperatives. These are like spug areas. These are areas na talagang mahirapan ng private corporations. Natatakot siguro or talagang hindi po nila nakikita yung bounds. Hopefully, in the near future, will be a middle income economy. We need more efficient power distribution. Talaga to ating kalaban, naging kaibigan, yung dating into the Philippines. And that's why we need to in regions. We also want this to be distributed all over the country. And energy is the key to that, Your Honor.
Oh, I agree. Good sponsor. Energy is really the key. And but at the same time, as the good sponsor knows, yung history din ng energy sector, it's important that we always remember. But before that point, indeed, franchises are a privilege. Here, that the SC affirms that we in Congress have the power na bawiin, exercise our police power. And syempre, ang implicit dyan is for cause. And I might even add, at least as part of my questions, in this period of amendments na keeping in mind the history of the power sector here in our country. Kasi indeed, there was no private sector participation in the country sa kulang mayat maya, any of them at one point in time or another. Pero itinawid nila yung kanayunan natin sa puntong ito na mas nagkaroon na ng value, yung lupa, yung economic activities doon, yung capital doon. So much so na naging attractive na rin siya for bigger players. And we want that. Domestic and foreign in compliance with the Constitution. Kasi nga, gusto natin yung binanggit ko kanina, good sponsor, na mixed economy. Pero siguro dapat meron naman din tayong tawag dito, itabi na the corporate play, knowing that they did kumbaga i-up yung money power nila to continually improve their services and lower prices. Sayang din yung yung 5 years before franchise expires na ibinigay ng NEA or in particular for Nordeco, yung 3 taon pang itinitira yung franchise, na putting these and maybe other factors into the balance na nakita una ng I should not speak of the other house, pero sige, nakita ng Kongreso, kasama na natin dito sa Senado, to give them a fairer shake, because gaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, good sponsor, and I'm sure the good sponsor graciously understands, they don't feel they're getting a fair shake in this particular scenario. So just to make that of record, good sponsor. Yes, Mr. President.
Just a short answer, because I know the Senate President is giving me his tiger look. Just a short answer. I totally agree with you. 3 pesos and 50 centavos per kilowatt hour. Sa tingin ko po, after 1 or 2 days po. And I think that is, at the end of the day, I guess that's the reason. We have to evolve. We have to face the facts. We have to modernize. And I think there's some electric cooperatives that have to realize this. And I hope this is a wake-up call for them to do even better, even try to come up with rate negotiations. Ang nangyari po kasi, hindi po nila nini-negotiate yung mga kontrata na nangyari 10 years ago and 5 years ago na napakamahal. Na yun, napakamura na ng kuryente available to many energy providers. But they don't want to renegotiate. So what happens is the people suffer. And so you have to prove that you're an efficient, effective electricity provider with the rates that are acceptable.
Nobody can argue with the principle. Yung presyo ng kuryente, at Meralco, customer ako, just saying for the record, mapapansin ko talaga. So, or that's where the role of the whole of our government comes in, na somehow to mediate, to our citizens, whether by legislation or, yes, good sponsor.
Yeah, actually, ikaw nagagalit na po kayo sa Meralco na 9 pesos per kilowatt hour
So,
lang.
sila rin sa Nordeco.
Kami, sa Bukidnon,
As-
we pay, including Bukidnon, we pay 13 to 14 pesos, same as the areas of Nordeco. So imagine how you feel if we have the same amount of electricity that we use. Talaga napakabigat, ma'am. So I
Oo
hope you
naman po.
understand, you can grasp also that context, no?
Opo.
In terms of consumerism, helping the consumers.
Like tulad ng Nordeco, as we were discussing earlier, where government siguro has less work to do vis-a-vis Meralco, then it would have to do sana, no? Tayo sa legislature, ewan ko lang kung ito din ang vision ng executive para sa post-EPIRA environment, andun pa rin yung mga electric co-ops with a meaningful stake. Just my last few questions, good sponsor, Mr. President, again, for the sake of fairness and transparency, ano pong treatment natin sa assets ng Nordeco pagkatapos ng takeover? Will Nordeco and its consumer owners be compensated? Dahil po, according to Nordeco, as of November 2024, 28 pesos 0.15 centavos, while total liabilities were 6,922,204,831.56, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President and Madam Senator, of course, when we tackled this bill, I told myself that I'm not going to force the valuation of their assets are fair, that nandito po sa ating panukala na priority hiring po sila, they'll be first choice pagdating po sa hiring. Pagdating po sa transition of operations, yung meron tayong nilagay po dito na Next 1 minute suspension, Mr. President. I want to read the exact provisions. It's here under section 2, Your Honor, letter A. The grantee shall have the option to purchase distribution system assets of Nordeco that Nordeco owns, located in expanded franchise area, when such a sale or disposition is placed at zonal value, assessed value, whichever is higher for land assets. So nandito po, no, consented by NEA and any other lending sources which then holds a lien on the Nordeco's properties in view of the requirements set under Presidential Decree 269, Section 36B, provided that the grantee shall place the purchase price of the distribution system assets in an escrow account of a third-party bank institution, etc., etc. So, meron po, ma'am, Mr. President, the assets will be, of course, bought from Nordeco, and I believe in the sharing of the grand scheme of things, I believe many of those assets will go to pay for the utang, no? The credit of Nordeco. Kasi kailangan yung unahin natin yung creditors. Diyan lang po magkikick in yung 20 centavo per that Nordeco owns. So this is actually a very novel provision that we put in the law. Could be a template also for further other franchises in the future. But yes, Your Honor, from letter A and letter B, there will be there's a section, there are two sections here that will be the sections that will guide the payment to creditors, Your Honor. And to
With the permission of the lady, may the chair interject? Account to be used to pay creditors.
that's correct.
What if there is an excess amount? Where will that money now go?
We have a provision here, Your Honor, Mr. President, that's requesting additional 20 centavos per kilowatt hour charge.
No. Where will that excess money go? That was supposedly paid to Nordeco
Mukhang walang excess.
in order to be initially used, correct?
Mr. President,
No, but assuming, because
DRC
remember,
meetings,
this is a cooperative.
yes.
It's comprised by, the cooperative is composed of the member consumers. So kung may extrang pera, in theory, dapat mapunta sa kanila. The point I'm driving at, Your Honor, and for the information also of the distinguished Deputy Minority Floor Leader is, whatever excess amounts should redound to the benefit of the member consumers.
That's correct.
It will redound still to the benefit of the consumers in theory if the amount is high.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But if the amount is high, then the surviving entity will also pass on that cost to the member consumers.
Yes, in theory, Your Honor.
So we have to find a middle ground here so that, would that be
Usually
correct?
what they do, if there's their consumers, it was actually discounted rates.
The point I'm driving at is I'm actually letting Senator Win listen to this so that he can perhaps during the period of amendments, I know he has a lot of amendments, propose this. A middle ground, Your Honor, in regard to the valuation of the assets, because if it is too high, it will still be passed on to the consumers. If it is low, it will be a lower amount passed on to the consumers. But ultimately, whether it's high or low, it should redound, the phrase, it should redound to the benefit of the consumers, the
Yes.
acquisition cost of the assets of the non-surviving entity, whether it's a zonal value, whether it's assessed value, fair market value, book value.
Yes.
We have to find a middle ground here that will redound to the benefit of the consumers.
Maybe we can put a mechanism where the ERC can resolve that if there is an excess fund,
That
let
is
the
a
ERC
possibility.
decide.
Again, this is within the hearing distance of
Yeah.
the distinguished
It's really under the office of the ERC to do that. It's under the responsibility
the
of the
Honorable
ERC.
Win Gatchalian. So anyway, the lady may proceed.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
President.
President. Thank you.
Maganda yung sinabi ni good sponsor, lalo na yung phrase na whichever is higher. Kasi I would like to add also to the inputs of the good Senate President. The members of Nordeco are, yes, member consumers, but completely they are member consumer owners. They own the assets of. May estimate na ba kung total assets of Nordeco are 10 billion pesos plus, while their liabilities are 6 billion pesos plus, Mr. President?
What's the evaluation? That's guess for 1 minute suspension, Mr.
Yeah.
President. Yeah.
Before Deputy Minority Floor Leader. The members comprising the cooperative are also consumers at the same time. Kasi may sukle dun sa ibabayad sa creditor, di ba? By way of refund or cheaper rate or lower rates.
Yes.
But if it is low, there's nothing to be passed on to them. Baka mabawi, baka mag-offset lang eh. Pag mataas, sisingilin din naman niya. Kung ano man yung binalik niya sa member consumers, baka singilin din niya by way of higher rates because of the high acquisition cost. I'm thinking out aloud really and shooting from the hip. Again, I think the gentleman can answer now.
If I may, good sponsor, before the good sponsor continues, just to dugtungan ko yung
Apo.
in effect, mauudlot yung prangkisa ng Nordeco dahil maa-award ang isang prangkisa sa isang korporasyon. Ihiwalay po natin yon dun sa ano yung magiging rate sa kanila bilang hindi na member consumer owners, kundi consumers na lang. Kasi, di ba, kung kunyari meron akong pagmamay-ari, then magte-take over dyan, gusto ko na tama muna yung presyo, lalo na kung sa pakiramdam ng Nordeco, napipilitan akong magbenta. Ayaw ko sanang magbenta, napipilitan ako. So, para to reduce the insult added to injury, at least yung injury, medyo tama yung pagkuwenta in terms of the assets vis-a-vis the liabilities. And then, next time na lang, kung kunyari nakuha na yung bahay ko, renter na lang ako doon, Step 2 na lang, yung pagkwenta namin ng bagong landlord kasi hindi na pala ako yung may-ari. Kung ano yung upa ko doon,
Well,
Mr. President.
while we can do that simplistically, I think at the end of the day, we would sooner or later have to face that reality. Na yung mataas na preso sa dulo, sila pa rin yung magbabayad, yung mababang preso, sa dulo, sila pa rin yung tatamaan. So again, a middle ground. Because either way, tatamaan sila eh, ultimately, in the end.
Mr. President, with all due respect, I'm all for finding a middle ground,
Yeah.
but we should, I think, we should do it in 2 steps rather than isang pakete. And with all due respect, it's not simplistic, it's a matter of fairness. Kasi lahat tayo na kung anong pagmamay-ari natin, simple or komplikado, kung mawawala sa atin or kukunin sa atin, we want a fair exchange. And then the next day na pag-usapan, okay, ngayon
Does he have the data?
Well, on the data, Your Honor,
34, so almost 1.8 billion. Based on the book value.
based on the book value in 2023, Your Honor,
It's about 1.8.
it's about
1.8.
1.8 billion.
ang assets good sponsor,
That's the book value.
book value.
Galing po sa kanila ito.
Tapos good sponsor yung total liabilities nila.
Because we're there, that has to be, the subsidies have to be refunded, Your Honor, which the LPC is most willing to do.
And which DLPC has the capital for. But just to pursue the fact, magkano po yung liabilities ng Nordeco sa ngayon?
We're getting it.
7.9 billion.
7.9 billion po.
Okay po. Hindi kasing layo sa sinasite ng Nordeco na 6.9 billion dun sa yung really establish what are the accurate details here as we move towards Nordeco losing its franchise 3 years early and DLPC being awarded a franchise. So last two questions na lang po, Mr. President, and these deal with similar questions I raised on the Meralco franchise. So DLPC, I was informed, even enjoyed a higher WAC, 15% for Group C than Meralco. Dumaan ba ang DLPC sa regular schedule ng reset process under PBR o katulad din sa Meralco ang nangyari na hindi nakapag-reset, Mr. President?
Yes, the distribution rates, Mr. President, of the LPC will apply to the two Nordeco customers. That will be transferred. Private D rates are based and do not necessarily reflect the true cost to serve the customers. So yes, the distribution rate will apply to Nordeco, the DLPC distribution rate. The true up process for the rates of private DUs under PBR using the actual weighted average tariff or AWAT methodology, wherein it is determined if the distribution related revenues of the DU are within the limits as provided by the ERC approved rates in
Salamat. Good sponsor.
2014.
2014. So 11 years. Similar sa Meralco. At magkano po ang WAC ng DLPC sa ngayon, good sponsor?
15%. Your Honor.
So 15% nga po. Mas mataas nga
Yeah.
sa WAC ng Meralco. So, salamat, good sponsor. So lastly, Mr. President, kung parehong daan ang dinaanan ng Meralco at DLPC, hindi ba mas makabubuti na magkaroon din ng pagsusuri at nabanggit na rin naman ng good sponsor yung prospective refund? So just to validate the amount of the refund and possibly it's na chinarge noon until this point in time ng DLPC na marirefund sa customer nila.
Ano po yung tanong kung magkakaroon?
Dalawang bahagi yung tanong po pero mukhang nasagot na ng good sponsor yung pangalawa. I'm just relating it. So, hindi ba mas makabubuti na magkaroon din ng pagsusuri tungkol sa yon WAC at saka yung rate reset at kasi kung may overcharging ayun dun ibabase yung nararapat na refund.
Well, unfortunately, Mr. President, ERC is set to conduct the reset process for DLPC's next regulatory period, and there are no rules covering that period that has lapsed since then. However, the reset process for the first PBR entry group, which includes Meralco, for the new regulatory period has started, and it is likely that the reset succeeding entry groups will follow in the near future. DLPC is part of the third PBR entry group. So again, I think the delay is with the ERC. Yes, it's with the ERC. Your Honor.
So similar nga po good sponsor dun sa
Meralco.
napag-alaman ko sa interpellation sa Meralco
Opo.
franchise. Similar, no rules, walang reset in earlier years for earlier regulatory periods kaya nag-lapse. So salamat na lang nabanggit ng good sponsor yung possibility ng refund in the past 11 years or so since 2014. So yun lamang po, Mr.
Thank you,
Good
Madam.
Sponsor. Dagang salamat sa pagsagot sa
Ay, isa pa yan, ma'am. Salamat
mga
tayo.
tanong ko in this period of amendments.
Thank
Salamat marami, Mr.
There's amendments from Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. Tapos na yan. After kay Sherwin.
We suspend the session for a minute.
Amendment, Senator Zubiri still has the floor. And to propose amendments would be Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Next to introduce his individual amendment is the gentleman from Valenzuela, Senator Gatchalian. You're recognized, sir.
Our resident electrical engineer.
Not electrician.
Sideline
Not
electrician.
Na-upgrade na po siya.
Sideline lang yun, sideline, Mr. President. Okay to, please flag mo na lang kung. On page 5, line 14,
a new section be introduced. 1.5 is amended to read as follows. Section 2. Manner of operations owned. Tama ba?
Ano nilalagay?
Let me just repeat, Mr. President.
Yes, please proceed.
Sorry,
Senator
Mr.
Gatchalian.
President. On page 5, after line 14, a new section to be introduced which reads, Section 2. Section 2 of Republic Act number 11515 is amended to read as follows. Owned, maintained, and operated or managed by the grantee, its successors, or assignees shall be operated and maintained at all times in a superior by the Energy Regulatory Government agency concerned to modify, improve, and change the facilities or system in such a manner to such extent as the progress in science and improvements in the electric power services may render reasonable and proper, provided that the grantee shall comply with all relevant technical standards.
Objection
Di na pala
to the proposed individual amendments. Hearing none, the amendment is carried.
Provided that the grantee shall comply with all relevant technical standards, rules, and regulations of the DOE and the ERC. There's a subsequent paragraph. Whenever practicable, and for purposes of maintaining order, safety, and aesthetics along highways, roads, streets, alleys, and or right of way, reasonable compensation to the grantee, considering the cost incurred to accommodate and administer the use of the grantee's facilities by such parties. The ERC shall decide in the case of dispute or disagreement between parties. So move, Mr. President.
Yeah, we agree, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is carried.
On page 5, after line 14, a new section be introduced which reads, Section 3, grantee shall provide universal service including unviable areas by the ERC. The grantee shall and reduce electricity costs. The grantee shall charge power rates in a least cost manner for its services to all types of consumers within its franchise areas. The grantee shall have the obligation to provide open and non-discriminatory access to its distribution system and services for any end user within its franchise area consistent with Republic Act number 9136, otherwise known as the Electricity Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. The grantee shall not engage in any activity that will constitute an abuse of market power, such as unfair trade practices, monopolistic schemes, and other activities that will hinder competitiveness of business and industries. The exercise of the rights granted herein shall not result in stranded assets and stranded contract costs of. So move, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
What does
the sponsor of this amendment, it says area, comma, including unviable areas, comma, in the least cost manner and in accordance with Republic Act number 11646, otherwise known as the Microgrid Systems Act and its implementing rules and regulations. Yun lang po,
Yes,
dadagdag na po.
yes, Mr. President, we accept.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
we
Mr.
accept.
President.
Is there any objection to the amendment of the gentleman
Please
from
pass.
Valenzuela? Hearing none, motion's carried.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 5, line 15, replace section 2 with section 4. So move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion's carried.
On page 5, line 21, after the word system, remove the phrase within its former franchise area included in the grantee's franchise area pursuant to section 1 thereof as amended. So move, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is accepted.
On page 5, line 26, after the word over, remove the word the and replace with the word its. So move, Mr. President.
Does the sponsor say?
We accept, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, the amendment,
In the grantee's franchise area.
it's in line 28, Your Honor, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
page 5,
Sorry.
line 20.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. President, let
Thank
me repeat. On page 5, line 28, after the word operations, remove the phrase in the franchise area included in the paulit-ulit ko.
I think there's a typographical error.
That's
Yeah,
what you call double redundancy, Your
Oo
Honor.
nga,
Yes.
Mr. President. I think it's
Subject to style, Mr.
subject
President.
to style na lang, Mr.
I have
President.
the amendment. to
Yes,
accept
and
this one.
the sponsor is agreeing.
Subject
Yes,
to style,
Mr.
Mr. President. Let me just read it out loud, Mr. President.
Yes,
just to be sure. In the franchise area included pursuant to section 1 thereof as amended. I so move, subject to style, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor
Yes, we
say?
accept, Mr.
For
President.
the record, the sponsor is agreeing to the amendment. Hearing no objection, motion's carried.
On page 6, line 2, remove the phrase 2 years from the approval of the expanded territory of this legislative franchise. Mr. President, on page 6, line 9, after the word grantee, remove the word may and replace with the word shall. I so move, Mr.
The
President.
sponsor say,
Yes, we accept, Mr. President.
hearing no objection, the amendment's carried.
On page 7, line 3, remove the phrase shall have the option to and replace with may offer to. I so move, Mr.
Does
President.
the sponsor say?
May I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended for a minute. Valenzuela is
Amendment.
the
Thank you, Mr. President. After conferring with the good sponsor, we withdraw the amendment, Mr. President.
thank you.
Thank you
The
very much.
proposed amendments withdrawn. Thank you, Your Honors.
Ito ba yan? This one mo.
Please continue.
Hindi ba ito tapos? On page 7, line 18, after the word creditors, remove the period and insert the phrase provided. Further, that the third party or independent appraiser
President. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr.
proceed.
President. Mr. President, let me reiterate my amendment on page 7, line 18. After the word creditors, remove the period and insert the phrase provided further that a third party or independent appraiser shall be appointed by NEA.
We accept, Mr. President.
An amendment is accepted by the sponsors. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the amendment
pala
is
yan.
carried.
That's the last. Okay. On. Okay. Want to A or B, or should the amount in the escrow account be and replace with if ERC determines that no escrow account has been created pursuant to A or B, or if the amount in the escrow account is. I so move, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
Mr. President, let me just read the entire, maybe I'll read the.
Yes, kasi we
putol
have
siya
to
eh.
read the entire,
Please proceed, Your Honor.
Yes. Hindi
So
ko-
that is the first amendment to page 8. And then on line 9, after the word charge, delete the word off and replace with to be determined by ERC within 3 months from such determination let me just explain, Mr. President. So the first step is ERC to determine whether the escrow amount is sufficient or not. If it's insufficient, the allowable charge to consumers so that the insufficiency can be paid.
Mr. President, to hasten the proceedings, because I don't like the
Okay.
Chief Minister to be waiting too long. We accept, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
We
President.
accept the amendment.
But that's
Both-
good. But
both
that's
amendments.
good, Your Honors, that we are discussing this, so it's in the record. So
Yes,
there's
yes.
no objection. Hearing none, the two amendments are hereby adopted.
Ito ba? I'll read this. Remove the phrase, provided further that the grantee shall have the right to impose this additional charge immediately. So move, Mr. President.
What's the sponsor say?
This is again in connected to the first amendment, Mr. President, because it's ERC.
This is a new, this is a new.
Yes, Mr. President, it's connected to the first amendment. So let me just repeat. On page 8, line 20, after the word further, remove the phrase, provided further that the grantee shall have the right to impose this additional charge immediately, because it's the ERC will determine, and we gave ERC 3
So
months
it's okay.
to decide. If
Yes,
not,
we accept, Mr. President.
okay.
Hearing no objection, the amendment's carried.
And lastly, Mr. President, on page 8, line 27, after the word under, replace.
It's carried.
That's it,
Your Honor.
that's it, Mr. President, and I thank the Chief Minister for being present here, so that all my amendments are accepted by the good sponsor, Mr. President. But I
Together
thank
with Congressman Abed Garcia of
and Congressman
Bataan,
Abbott Garcia,
who's
Mr.
still
President.
here.
But I thank the good sponsor for accepting our amendments, and thank you very much for allowing us to interpolate and
Energy expert. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Majority Leader.
President,
No other amendments, Mr. President. We can
Mr.
close.
President, with no other amendment, I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion to close the period of individual amendments carried. Majority Leader.
Uwi na tayo.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading House Bill number 11072. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Majority Leader.
Mr. President, after conferring with the principal sponsor, I move to reconsider my previous motion suspending closing the period of individual amendments. Mr. President. So moved.
Is there any objection with the motion of the Majority Leader to somehow withdraw the previous motion? Hearing none, motion's carried. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to resume the period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is carried. We recognize the distinguished sponsor, the gentleman from Bukidnon, Senator Mig Zubiri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. There's one more amendment that we failed to include. On page 7, line 6, or starting in line 3, the grantee shall have the distribution system assets Nordeco owns, located in the expanded franchise area, when such sale and other disposition is priced at book value using the Philippine accounting standards, which value shall be considered in the setting of rates in accordance with Republic Act number 9136 and its implementing rules and regulations for the benefit of the consumer. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. No further amendments to the measure.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion of the Majority Leader is carried. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, no further amendments being proposed. I move to approve on second reading, House Bill number 11072. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion of the Majority Leader to approve on second reading House Bill number 11072 is hereby approved on second reading. Congratulations to the sponsors.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2942 under Committee Report number 466. This is the bill resetting the first regular elections in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the resumption of consideration of Senate Bill number 2942 under Committee Report number 466 is now in order. Majority Leader.
Parliamentary status, Mr. President, is to propose the individual amendments.
Hearing no objection, the period of individual amendments is in order. We recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, the hardworking Deputy Majority Leader of the Senate, Senator J.V. Ejercito. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. On page 1, line 6, delete August 11, 2025 and replace it with 13 October 2025. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion's carried.
Actually, Mr. President, I'll just read Senator De La Rosa propose an amendment
Please
resetting it
proceed.
on the same line, resetting the election from August 11, 2025 to May 11, 2026. But the sponsor, as a sponsor, I did not accept it. Just for the record, Mr. President.
Yes, we take note of that, Your Honor. The gentleman from Bukidnon is seeking the floor. What's the pleasure of the gentleman from Bukidnon?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to second the motion, the request of Senator Bato de la Rosa. I know, I just want to put this on record. If I may be given just
Please proceed.
just a few minutes. Mr. President, I personally also wish to see a longer extension. I know in the last debates that we had here for the extension of the first round of the BTA, I said this would be the last extension. I was majority floor leader then. However, due to the circumstances that the Supreme Court, due to the Supreme Court decision that had come out, we need more time to be able to include Sulu in the plebiscite, hopefully to be able to. I'm not sure if 5 months would be enough, Your Honor, Mr. President. I would like to put on record that I'm pushing for a longer amount of time. But I think the sponsor is getting, of course, pressure from many quarters to shorten it. I just want to put that on record, Your Honor. I'm not here to object to the sponsor. I just appealing to him that if we can even make it 6 months naman sana, wag naman sana 5. Pero dagdagan mo pa ng 1 month kasi 2 buwan na lang naiiwan. Pagbalik po natin, Synergy, we will be taking it up in the SONA. After the SONA, we only have 2 months of work and then October na po yan. That's already break. And then we're tackling the budget. So I don't know if we have time to really pass a measure to grant or to give the chance to the people of Sulu to be able to participate in the plebiscite to come back and reintegrate, hopefully, if that is their wish, to the BARM autonomous region. So yun lamang po. I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to take note of that. Of course, we respect the principal as the principal sponsor of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. I was also an author, including the presiding officer.
Thank you.
We also sympathize. I would, Mr. President, as you all know, that I also briefed the Chief Minister and the Presidential Advisor that there's still hope in the BICAM. No, that will be the last hope. So that the last process will of the process, the last stage will be the BICAM. So the House of Representatives version has it at 1 year. If we pass, for example, this measure at 5 months, then more often than not, we have a compromise. So hopefully we meet in the middle ground. So we take note of that. We take note of the concerns of Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, of course, being the father of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Your anything you would say regarding the Bangsamoro Organic Law, the BARM, is well taken. No? And I also support anything for peace. So it's not yet over, Your Honor, Mr. President. There is still the BICAM. So hopefully we will have a better. We still have time, no? So that on what would be the best time really to reset the election that will be postponed, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Ejercito. I think it's
Mr. President, on that.
yes, Senator Cayetano, just if I may just put into the records, we understand fully where the distinguished sponsor is coming from, and that is part of again. There's yes, Senator Cayetano is recognized.
John, and acknowledge all the hard work he's put into it, not just this law, but the other laws regarding the region. I just like to add my name in this, and I'm glad that against each other. So much so that when we went to Malaysia, ang sabi sa akin ng head of research at saka yung NSA nila, Senator Cayetano, so you're the radical one. Sabi sa akin doon, no? And although we've gone so far, in the same manner na may pressure kay Senator JV kung anong feelings natin, may pressure sa Chief Minister and all of ministers to show more that we can do in the region because nga the hardships are there. So my point is that usually po kasi October, patapos yung September, nagbabudget sa House, they'll be asked to be there to defend. And then even assuming, of course, unahin nila yon, knowing these men and women who are very patriotic, they will do that. But then, whoever wins in October, nagbabudget naman sa Senate, they have to, di ba, parang redo it. So parang mas logical is that we give them the whole of this year to set the next 5-year, 10-year target for their region and also sa just as we have to all be individually invested because we are really saving billions and billions, tens, hundreds of billions. Mr. Secretary, we also honor you in all your hard work from the time na nasa AFP ka pa, kadebate ding pressure for reform is there. And, you know, the reality is it's an uncertain world. If we go back to the status quo ante or before we had this peace agreement, it will be a day putting on record then we think March, April, or May next year will be a more logical time frame. Having said that, you are our chairman and we are supporting you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Thank you. Senator Ejercito,
Yes,
you have the
to-
floor.
Yes, we in 7A delete the phrase and synchronized with the 2028 national elections and replace it with on the second Monday of October 2028. Thus, Article 16, Section 13 of Republic Act number 11054 shall now read as follows. Shall be held on 13 October. The Commission on Elections through the Bangsamoro Electoral Office shall promulgate rules and regulations for the conduct of the elections, enforce and administer them pursuant to national law, this organic law, and the Bangsamoro Electoral Code. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none. Motion is, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel is recognized.
For some discussion, Mr. President, so that's before we can form our position on the proposed amendment.
In this particular amendment,
Yes,
Your
on this
Honor.
particular amendment.
Please proceed,
So,
Your Honor.
we are fixing, we are not only, but this pending motion now or amendment is now fixes the BARM elections every October na. Starting in October 2028 and they synchronize the BARM, Mr. President.
Your Honor, Mr. President, the KIDA case only applies to ARM, Your Honor, Mr. President, but not this time to BARM, Your Honor, Mr. President. So they are not obligated to follow the synchronized national elections, Your Honor, Mr. President.
So you may be correct, literal come out of Supreme Court decisions, and isn't the one of the principles that we have read? Hindi po ba ang ruling doon is that the ARM o hindi BARMA, the ARM election is a local election.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President.
What will differentiate the BARM election from the ARM election, Mr. President?
Your Honor, Mr. President, the difference is that in the BARP, it's a parliamentary setup, Your Honor, Mr. President.
So wasn't the ARM election a regional election? That's why
Predicted that there will be a parliamentary setup for the BARM, no? That's why hindi naman kinakailangan maging that it is parliamentary.
ARM was
Hindi parliamentary, no? The ARM setup, Your Honor, Mr. President, according to our resource persons, is not parliamentary, Mr. President.
what do you call it, Mr.
Ano
President?
yung call nun? Anong tawag? Nasa po- Pero ang ARM nun, ano ba?
Senator.
Anong setup? Tinatanong ko,
Unitary.
In honor of Mr. President, the ARM setup was presidential and unitary form. And in the case of BARM, since it is parliamentary, be dissolved anytime, Your Honor, Mr. President, based on the parliamentary system.
But the parliamentary system also has fixed terms, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor,
Tama
Mr.
po yun, di
President.
ba? That's ata, then they can be go beyond those elected in an election, even in a parliamentary setup, cannot go beyond their fixed term. There must be an election held. Tama po ba yun?
That is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President.
And that mandatory election for the members of parliament, isn't that
Under Abbas versus Kida, Your Honor, Mr. President, it is considered as local, Your Honor.
yes, yun na nga. That's why I'm worried, Mr. President. Yun yung worry ko eh. So kasi dito talagang inano natin, we are desynchronizing
Synchronizing,
talaga, sinasadya natin. And then doon sa barangay and SK elections bill na pinag-usapan din natin, resetting, ang request ata ng, if I remember correctly, the inputs from the sponsor, Senator Amy Marcos, I think COMELEC says that they need 7 months after 7 months, at least 7 months daw after the national elections to prepare for another election. But that may be a national election siguro. Kasi barangay is national din eh. Although it's local, but it takes place all over the country. Ito is in one region lang. So can we disregard that 7 months time gap requested by COMELEC when it came to the barangay and SK elections?
Your Honor, Mr. President, according to COMELEC, our COMELEC resource person, that it is possible because the total voters in the BARB is only 2.8 million.
Kaya nga,
So, mas kaya po.
wag nating i-apply yung request na 7-month gap dito sa regional kasi
That is correct.
Right, okay, sige po. So that's what I want to point out, Mr. President, na yun na the effect of this one is we are really consciously desynchronizing what is an example of kind of a local election also, Mr. President, from the national election. So if I can appeal to the sponsor, if we can find a way to organize the national and local elections, Mr. President.
Well, probably, Mr. President, since the bill seeks to postpone the elections, no, Your Honor, Mr. President, the only way that since it will be postponed to another date, talagang madi-desynchronize na siya eh. So the only way we can synchronize it again is to postpone it again para mag-sync na rin sa susunod na national elections, Your Honor, Mr. President. So, but
The phrase "and synchronize with the 2028 national elections," Mr. President.
that is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President. At yan pa yung ano.
Hindi, Mr. President, kaya nga, di ba, gina-justify natin yung resetting nitong May 12, 2025. Yun na. So, okay na yun. That's another issue, let's say. Pero, ang next amendment, tama po ba ang pagkaintindi? The pending amendment fixes now the subsequent elections, and we are now consciously desynchronizing. So, that's what I'm pointing out.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, because that's why we already set the next elections, like for 2028, so that at least the new term of offices of the newly elected members of parliament would be exactly 3 years also, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Kaya nga, we are looking at the term of those to be elected. Ako naman nakatingin naman dun sa mandate ng Constitution to synchronize national and local elections. So, I do not know which should prevail, Mr. President. Ang problema rin ito, Mr. President, ibabaykam ito, posibleng ibang petsa ang actual election, isusunod ngayon natin yung subsequent elections to that month or second Monday of that month, which is the result of the bycam. So as of the moment, di pala ganun kaklaro when we will have the election, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, although treated as local, yung mga is we want to, so yun po siguro ang rason, Your
Pero
Honor, Mr.
I
President.
believe those statements are applicable also to the arm. Same applicable this to the arm, and yet the Supreme Court came up with those statements in the decision. So, Mr. President, so as not to delay, I will not even appeal to the body kasi baka that might cause a delay. I'm just I will manifest my objection to the pending amendment, Mr. President. So
Yes,
I just want to hear the response of the sponsor, Mr.
thank you, to the minority leader. We'll take note of that, Your Honor, Mr. President.
He is not in favor of that particular provision.
Yes, we'll take note of that, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So to
Yes, please
continue,
proceed. Please continue, Senator Ercito.
continue on page 1 between lines 12 and 13, insert the following paragraph. The term of office of the officials elected under this act shall commence at noon of October 30th, next following their election. So move, Mr.
Is
President.
there any objection? Hearing none, motion's carried.
On page 2, line 2, after the word qualified, insert a comma and the phrase. So move, Mr.
Is
President.
there any objection? Hearing none, the motion's carried.
Still on the same page, lines 3 to 11, delete the entire section 3 and certificates of candidacy for the parliamentary districts and nominees for party representatives listed in the certificates of nomination and acceptance incorporated in manifestations of intent to participate filed by duly accredited political parties from November election. New filings or certificates of candidacy or for manifestation of intent to participate with the list of nominees shall not be entertained. Provided that the COMELEC shall have the authority to issue appropriate guidelines on the filing of candidacies in case the seats are originally allocated to the province of Sulu are reapportioned by the Bangsamoro Parliament. Substitution of candidates and nominees shall not be allowed except in cases of death, disqualification, or incapacity pursuant to the guidelines promulgated by the COMELEC. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Here, the minority leader is recognized. Please proceed, Your Honor.
Did I hear the incapacity as a ground for substitution? Can I propose that ground be deleted, Mr. President, just so we will be consistent with the existing law, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Subject to style.
Subject
to style.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Yes, is there any objection to the amendment to the amendment? Hearing none, motion's carried.
Still on page 2, after the new section 3, insert a new section 4, we shall read as follows. Section 4, the Bangsamoro parliamentary election on October 25, 2025 shall not be treated as a special election and shall be considered a continuation of the 2025 national and local elections. Any amount obligated prior to the resetting of the Bangsamoro election shall remain valid. The amount necessary for the implementation of this act shall be charged against the current year's appropriations of the COMELEC or any available appropriations as may be identified by the DBM subject to existing budgeting, accounting, and auditing rules and regulations. Thereafter, such sums as may be necessary for its continued implementation shall be included in the Annual General Appropriations Act, subject to the usual budget preparation process.
From
No,
Mr.
Mr. President,
Objecting, no?
No.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion of the sponsor is carried.
So, Mr. President, Senator
Yes, Majority Leader.
Padilla is, seeking the floor for an anterior amendment, Mr. President. Move the-
Anterior amendment, we recognize the gentleman from Bicol and Central Luzon, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. You're recognized, sir.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at sa ating pong pinunong mayurya. Ako po ay humihingi lang ng pasensya sa ating sponsor. Ako po yung na-late sapagkat galing po ako ng BICAM. Galing po ako ng, malaking kapulungan. Gusto ko lamang pong maiksi lang po itong manifestasyon ko patungkol po doon sa hinihingi po natin na sana po ay 1 year, 1 taon po sa atin pong mahal na sponsor. Ito po ay pinaniniwalaan po natin na ito po talaga ang tama na panahon para po magkaroon ng katuparan muna yung mga naipangako po ng national government. Katulad po nung usapin sa Sulu, pati po yung mga kababayan natin na hanggang sa ngayon ay hindi pa po nakakaboto doon po sa 63 mga barangay. Maraming salamat po.
We take note of the manifestation of our esteemed colleagues.
Maraming
Thank
salamat
you, Your Honor.
kay Senator Robin Hood Padilla. Yan po yung naririnig natin. Kaya nga po natin na itinulak na magkaroon po ng postponement, no? Dahil may mga issues pa na kinakailangan ma-resolve. Some legal issues that need to be resolved. That's why we were hoping that with this amount of time, we can resolve those issues. And the last but not the least,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President, the
Proceed.
last amendment is renumbered.
Your Honor, distinguished colleague, we recognize the majority leader.
Mr. President, with no other amendment, I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion to close the period of individual amendments carried. Majority leader.
Mr. President, 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended for a minute.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading, Senate Bill number 2942, the bill.
Note my negative vote, Mr. President, like, because it's with a heavy heart that I have to vote no to this proposal. Last time kasi we stated it would be the last resetting, and then it's only for very special justification or very serious circumstances that we're allowing the resetting of this upcoming May 12, 2025 election. And then we are now permanently desynchronizing the BARM elections with the national and local elections. So for those reasons, Mr. President, it's with a very heavy heart because all of them are my friends, Mr. President. And I am actually, I'm the author of the BARM law. But this is not about, please note my negative vote, Mr.
We take note of the vote of the minority leader, majority
Mr.
leader.
President, there is a pending motion. We seek your ruling, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion of the majority leader to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2942 is hereby adopted. Congratulations.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2942.
Is there any objection?